Carl Reeder is a serial entrepreneur. He's the chairman of the business advisory firm D&T. He's the author of Boss It, the Startup Coach, and the Franchising Handbook. Carl's helped thousands of business owners start and grow their businesses by helping them understand that business isn't difficult, and of all the people that we've ever had on the main stage of Scaling New Heights, he has the most tattoos. Welcome, everybody, Carl Reeder.
Pandemic is a word that, if misused, can cause unreasonable fear or unjustified acceptance that the fight is over, leading to unnecessary suffering and death.
Life pretty much froze after this day.
There are new COVID-19 cases in North Texas,
and it is spreading fast.
Declaring a state disaster.
Fort Worth Mayor Betsy Price is expected to announce a stay-at-home order.
Dallas County will move to a safer-at-home order.
Our world turned upside down, forcing us to change our ways, forcing us to be by ourselves and focus on our health, because we had nowhere to be. What if I told you that in the city, the streets were empty? Would you believe me? What if I told you schools shut down and businesses closed too? Even stadiums weren't rocking like they used to. Would you believe me? We hear words like
isolation,
social distancing,
the lockdown,
to wash our hands since they can harm us, to keep 6 feet, we don't know who to trust. The fear turns into greed, so we take more than we need. But we're all in this together. We're all connected, all equally affected. A new dawn will rise. Everything will go back to how it was. Continue on doing the things we love. In the meantime, we'll miss our families.
Happy birthday, Lana.
Oh, I missed you.
We'll miss our friends. But we'll all be together again. We used to be on the phone when we're all together. Now we can't wait to get on the phone to be with each other. Will that change? Show support for our community, for the ones we love, and the ones who don't get appreciated enough. Yeah, someday it'll all be back to normal. People will fill the streets again. Sports will return. The only question left is, how do we move forward? Will our world change or remain the same? What is the new normal?
Pandemic.
Good morning, America. It is fantastic to finally be here. So as Joe said, I was due to be here in 2020, 2021, and this little thing called the pandemic got in the way. So when we were complaining, as I was, about our flights in Orlando, when we were complaining about 20-minute delays, 2-hour delays, let's try a 2-year delay on for size. It's not much fun. But actually, this is really interesting because it's the second time I've been able to say Good Morning America in 2 weeks. So like the buses in London, you wait for hours, or in this case years, and 2 come at once. And on that note, did the little saying about buses in London translate? Because I don't know what time zone I'm on, let alone what language I'm speaking. So if you notice me saying tomato instead of tomato, if you notice me with colours with a U instead of colours without a U, if you notice me, for the accountants in the room, saying niche instead of niche, please bear with me. And if there's any sayings that I say, and you're not quite sure what they mean, and you believe that they probably should be funny, but you're not sure, just laugh, just clap. Please feed the ego, okay? It will make me feel a whole lot better about myself. Now, you're not going to get 100 push-ups on stage. I know you all enjoyed that. But whilst you might look at me and think that I'm 240 pounds of pure muscle, there is an ounce or two of body fat here. 100 push-ups was probably something I could have done a long time ago, but not today. So, the new normal, where we are today. The video led us to believe that actually things would be back to normal. But I'm not quite sure that they are back to normal just yet. Does everyone here feel like things are back to normal? No. We are in a world of massive, massive uncertainty. And I can just remember going back to the beginning of the pandemic. And it was quite a surreal time. I've got a story to share with you later about my book, Boss It. And you will be amused to hear that the manuscript was completed on the 24th of February 2020. You can imagine how much fun the editing process was for that. But we'll go into that in more detail later. But I was also disrupted by COVID, just as each and every one of you were. We were all impacted. We all had to suffer a realization of our own mortality. We all knew people who were affected, perhaps gravely. We all had to juggle the strains of running a business, homeschooling, trying to work from home, trying to understand how to use Zoom, trying to understand how to take ourselves off of mute. We had to learn all of this stuff really quickly. As a speaker, I remember really clearly, my first speaking slot that was cancelled was actually at the start of March, 3rd of March 2020. And it was for a little company you guys might know of called Intuit. Okay, I'm sure you've heard of Intuit. I was at a large exhibition hall that was empty. Imagine a room like this, no chairs, just a dusty exhibition room. No carpeting, no stands. It was probably about twice the size, and I had to deliver this kind of session to an empty room. But we were talking to each other, myself and the other speakers. We were hugging, we were shaking hands, we were acting like actually everything's normal and this is an abundance of caution. Why on earth have attendees been stopped from attending this? We didn't actually get the gravity of this until a week later. Keynoting the Elite Business Show in London again. The trains were empty. I turned up to the event. 25% of the attendees at best. At best. I was making jokes on stage about giving away hand sanitizer and toilet rolls. It really was quite a somber atmosphere. And then the world started changing. Bookings started to drop out of the diary. The government told us all to stay at home. We had to keep on top of all of the stuff that was going on. We had to work out the government stimulus, how it was going to work. We had to make sure that we were keeping our own clients alive. We had to make sure that we were keeping our own businesses alive. We actually had to start thinking about our own cash flow management as well as our clients' cash flow management for once. We had to think about how we can go from being online accountants to actually true online businesses. We had to learn how to manage teams remotely. We had to learn how to motivate people. We had to learn how to juggle all of this stuff. So it's no wonder that we're all sat here with burnout at the moment and a little bit optimistic about the future, but actually we don't quite know if we're in the right place. Because I know this resonates with me. Has anyone ever felt like they're a headless chicken at the moment? Okay? Is anyone finding that they are no way near as productive as they might have been in the past? Is anyone finding they're indulging in creative avoidance? Now, that's my phrase for messing around, okay? And we've all been there, haven't we? We find ways of avoiding the important stuff that we know we need to do. We find ways of stopping ourselves from being truly productive, from truly making a difference. My favourite one is tasking apps. Let's be honest here. Who here has downloaded a brand new shiny task app? What's the first thing you do when you download a task app? You put some tasks on, okay? And why have you put those tasks on? It's stuff that you know you can do quickly so that you can hear that little ding to reassure you that you've completed it. It makes you feel like you've been busy. It makes you feel like you've been productive. It makes you feel like you've achieved something. But have you actually achieved something by doing that? Or have you just avoided some of the very tough decisions and very tough changes that we need to make in our businesses right now? Because we've all got changes we need to make. And in my book, Boss It, what I realized over COVID was that not only did I have a really tough editing job to do, but also the content of this book, which was originally designed for startup businesses, actually applied to businesses of all shapes and sizes. And then over time, I realized that the content actually applied to anything we're trying to do in life. And I'll share those with you later. But back to the manuscript, 24th of February 2020. I sent my manuscript in, and I am embarrassed to admit this, but I'm going to admit it. I'm going to share with you what was in the original foreword of the book. I was talking about what strange, surreal times we live in. I was talking about the fact that the world had never been so uncertain. And I'm truly embarrassed to say, I wrote about climate change. I wrote about, in the UK, we were dealing with Storm Ciara and Storm Dennis, because I was writing my book. At the time, I lived in an old converted barn, and I could look outside. I could see the damage that had been caused by these storms. So it was front of mind. And we were told that these things will only be getting worse. I talked about the geopolitical uncertainty. The US and North Korea weren't best of buddies at that point, and it was quite a scary time. And by the way, there's this little challenge going on in China. But never mind that, we've got these more important things to worry about. How stupid do I feel now? How much did our world change? But actually, these things that were front of mind and really impacting our businesses at that point, how comes they got disrupted so quickly? So as you can imagine, the editing process was fun at best. We had to I had to remove all references to offices and face-to-face networking, pretty much had to rewrite the book. But as I say, that was the moment where I learned that actually, the stuff that I've written about here is important for all businesses going through change. And the reality is, we are all restarting our businesses. Us as accountants and bookkeepers, our clients, we're all restarting. Now, I need somebody to volunteer. So has anybody here ever wanted to be up on main stage? Let's have some, well, this gentleman here has been pointed at. Come on, sir. Okay, so for health and safety purposes, anything that happens is not my fault. Please use the stairs. So, sir, what's your name? Victor. Victor, big hand for Victor, please. Now, this is fantastic because Victor has no idea why he's on stage.
No push-ups.
There's no push-ups, don't you worry. But Victor has no idea why he's up here. He has no idea what he's going to be doing. You take your opportunities, don't you, Victor?
I do.
Take this opportunity. Fantastic. Okay. Here's one ball.
Okay.
Turn and face the audience. Can you juggle one ball? There we go. Big hand for Victor. Okay, quit while you're ahead. Oh, it's getting tricky.
You ready to catch it?
Here we go. Victor, thank you so much for demonstrating, but we can juggle 3 balls. Now, there's plenty more here. Victor, so if you wait one moment, I've got a gift for you. Here you go, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. What did we see from Victor's performance there? And by the way, you did a whole lot better than I ever could. I am so uncoordinated, I couldn't even attempt to do that. We saw that Victor actually was able to pick up the balls again. Because these balls are made of rubber. They're dog balls, they're not juggling balls. But the reality is, when it comes to our business, is that we actually have rubber balls and glass balls. Anybody here know a guy who, I believe is a little bit famous over here, called Brad Smith? Okay, so Brad, I've been really fortunate to have conversations with him a couple of times, and Brad was kind enough to read my book on a Sunday, believe it or not, and provide some words for the cover. And Brad was the guy who shared with me this concept of rubber balls and glass balls. He shared with me the fact that we can juggle, but we need to be very careful with what balls are in the air. Because we have our rubber balls, they are the things that bounce. Those are the things that we can pick up again. These are the things that, you know what, in 2 years from now, if I'm still saying the same thing, I can use these balls again. But the glass balls, we have to be careful. We have to think about what is it that's really precious? What is it that we need to protect? What is it that we must make sure that we do not lose by focusing on the rubber balls? And something I've observed with small business owners across the UK, and I'm sure it's replicated across the world, is that actually during the pandemic and after the pandemic, as we come to recovery, we're focusing on the rubber balls. We're focusing on the things that aren't necessarily important, but they're in front of us. They're the things that we feel we need to do. So make sure that you're focusing on the right things in your business. Now, who here has found that there's something that they want to change or implement in their business as part of this conference? Fantastic. I'm sure the sponsors are delighted to see that there's going to be some change coming. What I'm going to be doing is sharing with you the concepts and the processes from my book, but how that can be used in the context of change. How you can use that to really make sure that your business is set up for success in the future. And you can use these principles as well in advising your clients. You can use these principles for anybody who wants business advice. It's not complicated stuff. I'm actually sharing with you stuff that you already know. This is stuff that you know intellectually. But logically, we get it. Emotionally, do we do this stuff? No, we don't. It's a fixed process. So, the fundamental process that I believe that most small business owners that are starting should go through is a simple 4-step process that begins with the dream. When did you most recently recheck in with your dream for your business? When did you sit back and think, is this what I really want? Because we all have reasons why we start a business. Sometimes, let's be honest, it's because we're sacked or we're made redundant. Sometimes it's because we want Fridays on a golf course or to do the school runs. Sometimes it's because we think we're going to make millions and millions of dollars. We know the reality isn't like that. We know that the best thing about running your own business is the fact that you get to choose which 18 hours per day you work. Okay? We know that we would rather be working for ourselves, we would rather be working manically at all hours rather than doing half of that for somebody else. But we had a dream when we started. We had a reason. We had something that was compelling us to do this. We had something that was forcing us to make this big jump, make this dramatic change, put our families at risk, potentially fail in front of everybody. But how often do we go back and check in with that as existing business owners? How often do we go and sanity check to see if we've really done that? Now listen, a dream is great. We need a dream. We need to make sure that it stretches us, but it's not too ambiguous. I like to use the analogy of Nike. Now again, that's another UK-US difference. So we say Nike, you say Nike. So hopefully I've got that right. But with Nike, their dream is that every athlete wears their training gear and so on. And by athlete, they mean everybody with a body. Wow. Wow. If your dream is to be providing bookkeeping services and tax return services for everybody with a body, I hate to break it to you, but that's not going to be very motivating 2 years in, when you've got a pile of tax returns to do and you're wondering how the bills are going to be paid. So the dream needs to be balanced, but it needs to be something that motivates you, that gets you out of bed, that actually makes you push forwards. But a dream alone isn't enough. You then need to focus on your plan. And we talk about business plans when we talk about planning with our clients. We talk about projections and cash flows and income statements and all of this stuff that finance professionals are extremely assessed by. But for me, the plan that is important Whether you're starting a business, whether you're going through a change process, whatever it is you're doing, it's an operational tactical plan. What are you going to do? When are you going to do it by? What are the contingencies on that? How does the actual process of doing this map out? Once you've done that, the most important step of the process, take action. How many of us have become spreadsheet millionaires? I know I have. Because it is really simple in a plan and a dream to add the zero key a few extra times, okay? We're gonna get 100 clients, let's make it 1,000, let's make it 10,000. The reality is, for most small businesses that I've seen, this is the critical step, but this is where they fall foul of creative avoidance. This is where they actually make a huge mistake and they don't wear out the shoe leather. They don't go knocking on doors. I know we're not supposed to be knocking on doors during COVID. I know that's something that we're probably warned against these days. But they don't go out there and actually do it. They don't take that important first step to make it work. I remember one that I hate coming up next. It's the tough one. So a quick show of hands, who here has read The E-Myth by Michael Gerber? Okay, so we've got a few of you, but there's a few without your hands up. So I'm just going to share an analogy from the E-Myth Revisited, but with a bit of context for those who might not have read it. Gerber talks about the entrepreneur, the manager, and the technician. I think we're comfortable with those phrases, but you have the entrepreneur who's very big picture, is thinking about where it's going to be in the future, is thinking about what this could look like. You have the manager, who is setting up the systems and the processes. The manager is making sure that the buses are running on time. And then you've got the technician. So you could have the entrepreneur running the bus company, the manager making sure the timetable's being met, and the technician driving the bus. Now you might have noticed in those last 3 slides, the dream sits with our entrepreneurial mindset. The plan sits with our managerial mindset, and the action sits with our technical mindset. This one right here is a really tricky one. This one takes all 3. This one takes us facing the bits that we're not so good at and critically appraising what's worked, what hasn't worked. So, we know that it's time for change. We know that things need to change in our businesses, in our clients' businesses. We know that what happens today is not representative of what's going to happen in the future. Heck, I've gone through a load of changes here. To be speaking on Zoom cameras and those headaches that you get after 6 hours of back-to-back meetings. You know, Zoom fatigue is a real thing, I'm sure you guys all agree. Zoom fatigue has been the killer for me. But we've also had to change our working environments. Working from home, I'm sure there'll be a number of us here who perhaps worked in an office before, but are now working in a spare bedroom or a cabin in the garden or on the kitchen table. Okay? We've all been through this kind of change that's been forced on us. In fact, you might see a beautiful lady going around taking pictures of me. So one of the changes is I had to work a lot closer with my wife. Yeah, that was interesting. That was interesting. So you'll see her taking pictures. There was no way on earth that she was going to allow me to come to Orlando without her. Okay? Otherwise, divorce papers would have been on the table when I came back. So if she gets in the way trying to take some pictures, that's just to feed the social platforms and the ego again. So things have changed. We've changed what we do. We've changed the way that work and home combine with each other. And we've changed the way that we have our relationships with our clients. But you're going to find here that you've been inundated by vendors and by messaging and stuff that you can do. And the rubber ball, glass ball analogy is a great way for starting to filter it. But actually, how do you make these change projects a success? Well, we've got this beautiful opportunity in front of us with COVID. We've got this beautiful opportunity, but if it goes wrong, we've got something else to blame. If we screw it up, it was COVID, wasn't it? But if it works, you know what, I'm great, pat on my own back. Okay, so we need to be prepared to start with a blank canvas. If there's any changes that you're looking to implement in your business, whether it's to put in new software, whether it's to change your staffing arrangements, whether it's to change your office arrangements, whether it's to change the type of clients that you're going after, whatever it is that you're looking to change in your business, you've got the perfect opportunity now to do it. And it's not just perfect because we've got a fail-safe. It's perfect because it's something that we all need to be doing right now. If we don't do this stuff, if we don't make sure that we're proactively managing this change, rather than letting the change happen to us, we know what's going to happen. Who here remembers a little company called Kodak? Okay, who here remembers Blackberries? I don't need to share these examples. You guys know these examples. You've probably heard them time and time and time again. Businesses that got complacent, businesses that allowed the world to happen to them, rather than affecting that change themselves. And we can compare that to the likes of Apple. And it's quite staggering to believe that, despite hearing an Apple ringtone there, it's almost as if I planned that. It's quite staggering to believe that Apple decided to disrupt their own biggest seller in the iPod and do things completely different because they had the opportunity, they could see what was ahead. So don't be afraid to step back and start again. And don't quit either. Don't quit. If you really feel like you need to stop this, if you really feel like you need to jump off of the bus, if you really feel that the change going on around you is too much, you have got the perfect excuse to just try and see what happens. And finally, it has to be a perfect balance. Now, I'm fortunate enough that Joe has allowed me to run a workshop later on this afternoon as well. Because when speaking to Joe, we were talking about what was important for this conference. What did we want each and every one of you to come away with? But more importantly, not just come away with in terms of reams of notes and swag and so on, but actually, what did we want you to come away with in terms of actionable changes that you can implement in your business? So we're running a workshop. It's the last session of the day. You'll see it on the agenda, but it is a workshop, not a listen shop. It will be in a more intimate setting, and it will be an opportunity to go through these processes in detail with you with live examples to see how these changes can be implemented, to test the changes that you want to put in your business, but be prepared to work. You're not going to be able to sit back and just relax and enjoy my Essex accent, because it's not very enjoyable, but I know it's a little bit different. Okay, so the balance that I was talking about. With every change that we put in place, there's a range of things that we need to balance. There's a range of moving parts. And one of the ways in my businesses that we look to do that is that we find ways to align any innovation that we're putting in place to who we are as a business, so that we can rate them. It's effectively a balanced scorecard approach. So, very simply, if you imagine an Excel spreadsheet, I know you all know Excel, I know you probably all detest Excel, but just imagine an Excel spreadsheet with a list going down here of everything we want to do. We then score those on a number of metrics. We look first of all at the cost of implementation. Look, I'm an accountant by training. I might not have practiced for 20 years, but I'm an accountant by training. We look at the cost. We look at the return on investment. We then look at, as a business, which one of our stakeholders does it serve? Okay, we like to call them our 5 stars in D&T. So we have our 5 stars. Our 5 stars are, at the very top is our team. We then have the clients that we serve, which we actually call partners, but that's really confusing because obviously in most accountancy firms, the partners are the bosses. But our client partners and the markets we serve. We then have our community and the accountancy profession. They're the 5 points of a star. That's our 5 stars. So we look at who does this innovation serve? We look at what value does it help us tick? We have our defined values as being professional, caring, passionate, and innovative. Does this proposed change make us more professional? So does it help us get stuff done quicker, get stuff done more accurately? Does it help us become more caring? Does it help us become more passionate? So we try to rank it that way. And then we can assess every change that we're trying to put into our business. What's it going to cost? How much is it going to take out of our pocket? What's going to be coming back? And have we got this balanced spread against everybody who cares? So it's really important, before you dive into the process of mapping out these changes, that you understand, you look after your glass balls, and you have that kind of process in place. Next up, we then create a one-pager. And that one-pager consists of 5 questions. And I believe there's only 6 questions in the English language, and I've not included question number 6 because I think it's irrelevant. But this one-pager method that I use, and I use it in all of my businesses. So whilst I've got the accountancy firm, I've got a business brokerage, I've got a VC company, all sorts going on all over the place. I use this for each and every project that I'm instigating. My senior leadership teams use this as well. And it's a really simple way of making sure that everybody's on the same page on the change. Now, that change might be something as dramatic as changing our ledger software at D&T, but it could be as simple as reorganizing our channel structure on Microsoft Teams. It could be as simple as moving our photocopier. It doesn't need to be a dramatic change, but this helps us understand what we're doing, et cetera, et cetera. So, what is it that we're trying to change? What is it that we're actually trying to achieve here? And often, the first answer that we get from that isn't the correct answer. We have to dig a little bit deeper. We have to understand truly what is it we're trying to do. How can we summarize that? How can we encapsulate that in 1 or 2 sentences so that this one-pager could be given to anybody in the business or outside the business, and they have complete clarity on what it is we're trying to achieve with this. Next up, who is involved in this change? Now, we touched on the 5 stars, but actually, it's all well and good knowing who the stakeholders are in a change, but we need to understand what the impact is of that change on them. Certainly for us, communication in every single change process I've been involved in since about 2002, which was when I started doing this stuff rather than just being told what to do, every single change process has been let down by a lack of communication. And that might not be communication to clients, that can be internal communication as well. Failing to hit the right buttons and make sure that each and every person understands what's in it for them. Because we need to make sure that our team are all rowing in the same direction. We need to make sure that every stakeholder who's impacted by a change actually has the opportunity to have their thoughts and fears voiced, that they have the opportunity to be part of that process, and they have opportunity to actually have true buy-in into this. So we need to understand who's involved. We need to understand how it involves them. We need to understand what the impact is, what their fears might be. We all know turkeys won't vote for Christmas. But as leaders of firms, we all too often try to push down change that actually could scare the living daylights out of somebody. We try and force things through. And the problem is, we get it. We're the ones who've been in the exhibition hall speaking to a vendor. We've bought into it. We've joined the dots in our minds. We know what it is we're trying to achieve. But we don't communicate that effectively to our team members, to our clients, to other professionals who might be involved. If we, let's say, for example, our clients are mid to large-sized corporates. If we're making a change and it impacts the contractual relationship, don't you think their legal team will have something to say about that? So we need to think about this holistically. Who does it impact? How does it impact them? How do we make sure that they're all on that journey? We then need to set this thorny issue of a deadline. We need to set this thorny issue of having some accountability to our change. Quick show of hands, who here, and I'm going to include myself in this, has projects that are still outstanding? Yeah, I feel you. I feel your pain. I know what it's like. The shiny object syndrome kicks in. You see this new software, you see this new way of doing things. You hear on the grapevine of this great new service or solution. Joe mentioned that opportunity is not an obligation. And that is a great saying that I've taken away and I've shared on my own socials. We have all of these opportunities and we start them all, but then we actually take action on maybe half of them. And then we complete maybe 10% of them. We have to start less, finish more. And the stuff we start, we have to have a very clear deadline. We need to understand, going back to that operational plan, what the contingencies are, what the steps are, what steps rely on other steps to make sure that the project runs smoothly. And we include the bones of that within our one-pager. Next up is the how. Now, the likelihood is, unless it's a really simple change, unless you are improving your document management by moving your photocopier closer to the person who uses it most often, which, by the way, is one of the easiest and most effective changes most of you can make if you're not completely paperless yet. Unless it's something as simple as that, you probably don't know the how at this stage, but you will know a few of the simple steps that you can take to get the ball rolling, to be engaging with the vendors, to be engaging with your team, to be doing your research, perhaps on different options, perhaps on who you need to be consulting. You will know some of the stuff you need to do. Get that down on paper as well. So you've started with a fairly simple one-pager. What it is you're going to do, when you're going to do it by, who's involved, how you're going to do it. The most important one is the why. All of these things are underpinned by the why. And as I said, it's 5 of the 6 questions in the English language. That's the only questions we've got, okay? The final one is where, but I presume that for most of us, given that we're now virtualized and smaller businesses, that's not so much of an issue as we're not operating internationally. But the why is critical. And yes, I know that the likes of Simon Sinek have popularized trying to understand what your why is. Now, I don't necessarily buy into that in all cases. If you're selling widgets, if you're selling paper clips, and you're selling them for, I don't know, 5 cents each, and you're selling them at 5 cents each because everyone else is selling them at 6 cents, does it really matter that your why is to help empower people who are trying to bundle 10 pieces of paper together? Okay? I love the concept, but I think it applies to a certain subset of businesses that are selling in a certain way. However, when it comes to change, when it comes to things that you're trying to implement in your business, and when you're trying to affect the role of a true leader, understanding the why behind the actions that you're doing and making sure that that's clearly communicated is critical. Because your team can't read your mind. All they're seeing is that you've suffered from shiny object syndrome again. Betty's been to Scaling New Heights and she's come back with a bag full of toys and she's come back with a load of leaflets and she signed me up to a load of mailing lists. They don't understand what was going through your mind when you were having those conversations. What was the light bulb moment that sparked you? So you have to make sure that that's clear. Now, as I said, in my workshop, not a listening shop, in my workshop, we'll be going through that, and it will be the ideal opportunity at the end of the day, at the end of a conference, for you guys to unload what it is you want to do, and I will work with you in that session to actually make sure that you've got a plan mapped out that you can implement, so that you don't go back with a load of people to call and a load of people calling you, but you actually go back with a clear action plan of what your next steps are, to make sure that you get value out of these days you've spent here, to make sure you get value out of the money you've invested. But I want to share with you one last thing, and this is a personal story. So, if you see a grown man blubbering on stage, especially one that looks like me, please do excuse me. But I've talked a lot about the past during this session, and I'm going to be doing that again. 23rd of July, 2021. And my missus is probably at the back there wondering what on earth he's going to say. So this is the first time she's ever seen me speak in public. You know, previously, before we started working together, I was just the idiot who talked a lot. 23rd of July, 2021. We went out for a fantastic meal. And I don't know if you guys will know this guy, but in the UK he's very famous, a chef called Raymond Blanc. I don't know if he's known over here. He's a Michelin-star chef, and probably in the UK at the level of Gordon Ramsay, that kind of standard. Anyway, we had a fantastic meal in the wonderful city of Oxford. I don't know, has anybody here been fortunate enough to visit Oxford in the UK? Excellent. So we're fortunate enough to be about 20 minutes from there. So we went for the meal. It was a wonderful meal. They'd set out a nice table for us, an area where we could be on our own. It was immaculate. It was what we could have only have dreamt of. after that meal, we decided to spend a bit more time in Oxford. And this was back when I was drinking. So I'm still on dry January, which is very embarrassing, but I'm still dry. But back then, we'd had a glass of wine with a meal, and I decided to have a glass of wine afterwards. We went to a rooftop bar overlooking Oxford, and I had a bit of a pain in my chest. And Sarah's probably remembering exactly what day that was now. I had a bit of pain in my chest. So, being a man, and unfortunately in the UK, we get a bit touchy about gender stereotypes, but I think I can attack myself, can't I? I'm a typical man, and I suffer from man flu and man sickness and all sorts of man issues. So being a typical man, I didn't take note of it. We went home, and unfortunately that evening, the chest pains happened again. Again, Sarah will no doubt be nodding madly over there. The chest pains kicked in. Being a typical man, I didn't want to do anything about it. But Sarah called the ambulance out. The ambulance team came in, they took the ECGs and so on. It wasn't a critical, urgent thing, but I did need to go to the emergency department. Being a typical man, I'll sleep it off. Okay, so I like to milk the sympathy, but I don't like to take any advice. So I thought I'd sleep it off. Anyway, I ended up in the emergency department at 5 a.m. And that was the wake-up call for me. Now, we've talked about the glass balls and the rubber balls. But a critical message that I want you to take from this, something that I want you to bear in mind, is that the glass balls and the rubber balls don't just apply for your business. There are so many things that we need to think about in the context of this. And COVID should have been that wake-up call for us all, but it wasn't for me. COVID should have been the thing that reminded us that actually the wheel of life, what it is that we live for, doesn't just include work. When we think of glass balls and rubber balls, we might be thinking about our key team members. We might be thinking about our key clients. They are the things that we need to do everything to protect. But really, what about our health? What about our family, our relationships, our hobbies and recreation, our spirituality? All of this stuff, we need to be really careful and make sure that we're crystal clear and that we don't drop a glass ball. Thank you.